It is July the 12th, 2024. We're giggling off the record. Common Sense Ohio coming at you week in and week out. I'm back after a 2-week hiatus of various activities, both work and play, and work and play together. But I am back. Sorry I missed the last couple weeks. CommonSenseOhioShow.com. That's exactly where you go. www.CommonSenseOhioShow.com. That's exactly where you go for all the backlog of episodes. If you want to check out Norm's blog, I'd love to say check out my blog week in and week out, but it's still blank. You can also subscribe to all our social media. You can like, you can share, and that would be a great favor for us. If you listen to the show and you're one of the millions that are listening but sort of hiding in the shadows, you don't even have to come out of the shadow. Just tell your neighbor, but even more, like it.
It'd be nice if our relatives did that even
if our relatives did that. Even if the people that have to listen.
Right.
Or have to act like they're listening.
Hey, boys, come on, dads, just like it, and you don't have to read it or listen to it.
Just share it.
Dad needs a new pair of shoes. Come on. Just like it. It's money in our pocket. There you go.
So how do we do this otherwise? Well, we do it with the help of Harper Plus Accounting, where they take care of our accounting needs, your accounting needs, and everybody else's accounting needs who is smart enough to go to Harper Plus Accounting. They have divisions for all. In other words, if you've got a complicated mess and multiple businesses and layers of LLCs, and you want to figure out how much you owe the government and how much you should pay and how much you can avoid paying lawfully, that is, Harper Plus can help you. If you've just got a tax return that needs done, they've got a brand new division designed to address just that. So nobody is left in the cold at Harper Plus Accounting. Glenn's been on the show. Glenn Harper, that is, been on the show a few times, and he is about as down-to-earth of a round-table guy as you could get. He's got his own show. What's it called, Brett?
Empowering Entrepreneurs.
Empowering Entrepreneurs. So check out his show. It's a great podcast. He does it right here at Channel 511. And while we're on that topic, if you want your own podcast, you think, I got the chops, you can do a couple of things. You can come hang out with us at the round table if you think you got the chops to hang with Norm. I barely do.
Come on.
So you can come and offer whatever you want to offer. Now, we're not letting everybody on, but if you got something interesting, or if you're involved in the Ohio political world, the Ohio business world, the Ohio news world in any way, shape, or form, or even if you just have a stupid human trick you'd like to show off, we'll put you here too. Just check us out. You can leave us a comment at Common Sense Ohio. But you want your own podcast, go to Channel 511. Never been easier. Never been easier. We've got an app, Calendary, whatever it is. You just schedule the time. Our production pros show up with you. You lay down the tracks, we give it to you. You leave with audio, you leave with video. We can even help you if you want to get even more in depth on how to get up into the world of podcasts, the ether world of podcast posting. We got Brett right here, our own Brett host, who runs Circle 270 Media, who is basically podcast consultant.
And it's, I have to say, so I'm not involved in that end of this business, but I have to say the rates are extremely reasonable. It is, you can get a studio time in here with a professional like Brett, Dan, and it's a bargain. I mean, for what you get.
Well, look, and if you think you can do it on your own, I could not.
No.
It took me a long time, and it cost me a lot of money to figure out how to make myself sound so good.
Right.
It does not come naturally.
No, I couldn't do it.
We had to figure out the microphones. We had to figure out the chain of what do they call it? Whatever. We had to figure out the
just how to get it out,
the
how to get it out,
production, and the amplifiers, and the preamplifiers, and the recording software, and all that.
Yeah. But all that stuff, in the sense that we make it easy for somebody coming in. They just walk in, record.
It's baked
done.
in.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to buy microphones.
It's a good deal, is what I'm saying. Yeah. And like if you're dreaming of doing, I don't know, golfing, or you want to talk about quilting, or whatever it is.
Ooh.
Well, in Johnstown, somebody just opened a quilting store.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's great.
So,
all right, well, quilt away. So every week, except for the last two, there you go. That's the tagline. You've already given them the tagline for the show. Quilting 101, the fabric of society. All right. Stitched together.
Oh, God, here we go.
One needle at a time. Stitching together the fabric of society. All right, so we are...
there goes Steve telling more yarns.
Yeah. On July 12th, 1944, it happened to be the bloodiest, the largest tank battle of ever. And I think it was part of the biggest battle of all time, which is Kursk. Shortly after, this is when Hitler fought Stalin. It's a great book on some of this stuff, but when Hitler fought Stalin. But it was shortly after, I don't know how many months after, it was the spring after Stalingrad. And the Germans were sort of reeling with their tail between the legs. Hitler's advisors were saying, Kursk is nothing for us. Why don't we back off here a little bit? We've got the Allies coming from Sicily. We've got certainly inevitable invasion somewhere in France, and we can't devote any more resources to get slaughtered by these Soviets. And even Hitler himself, I hear tell, knew about it. I mean, he said, my gut doesn't feel right about this. His advisors, most of them anyway, were saying, don't do it. And what does Hitler do? In typical fashion, does it anyway.
Yeah.
He invades on July 5, 1943.
Yeah.
And kicks off the Battle of Kursk. And he had waited and waited and waited to have the top most state-of-the-art tanks produced, the Tiger IIs, I think.
Yep.
And maybe the Panthers.
Yeah.
And he took a bunch of trainees that were training that could have been used to help against the Allies in the West. Yeah. Instead, he hijacked him and sent him off to the Eastern Front. I remember watching Hogan's Heroes, where it's like, go to the Eastern Front. And I remember thinking, I wonder how bad the Eastern Front really was. It was terrible.
It was pretty bad. Yeah,
right.
It was pretty bad. Take no prisoners, almost literally.
Yeah. This is like when everybody's fought, not everybody, but everybody knows the guy that if you pick a fight with that guy and you come with fists, he's bringing a knife. If you come with a knife, he's bringing a gun. Or if you get chains, he's getting a carjack. It's like the guy who doesn't stop. It's a fight to the death, and that's what it was with Stalin. There was no quarter.
Well, the war in the Soviet Union, people have to remember in Mein Kampf, Hitler talked about Lebensraum. So
living
space. So it was a war initiated by Hitler to replace a people, to actually replace Slavs and Jews. Kill them, relocate them, turn them into slaves, whatever it was. It was to replace them entirely, as opposed to, say, like a war for natural resources.
Right. So,
it was
the
a
Soviets
different kind of. It was a war of survival.
Yeah, they had a lot of oil. They had a lot of natural resources, and they had a lot of human resources that would have been helpful in Hitler's, plan to own the world because it's labor. But instead, he wanted to exterminate everybody and then have his own living space in that land.
Right. Yeah. So, like when he entered the Ukraine, which had been under terrible domination by Joseph Stalin, and they had, millions had died from famine and by planned famine. Like, we're taking the grain from Ukraine and feeding Russians instead of feeding Ukrainians, and there was a huge amount of death. And so they welcomed at first the German. They viewed it as liberation. Many of the Ukrainians. And, of course, Hitler had no such idea. He wasn't there to liberate anybody. He was there to exterminate them.
Yeah, he wanted to kill them and take the land. Yeah, so he wanted the resources, but he didn't want the people.
Well, in the first mass executions of the Jews in these captured countries, I'm talking way bigger than what happened in Poland, was like in Babi Yar, which was like downtown Kiev. I mean, so in Kursk, the thing that was crazy, this is not the first time, and I think the Wehrmacht, the German generals, recognized that they were walking into a trap or rolling into a trap. So like at Stalingrad, what the Soviets had done is they had lured the Germans into staying in a salient that they then surrounded and then, basically destroyed the German army inside the salient. And they pretty much tried to do the same thing and were successful more or less at fighting the Germans, at least to a draw in Kursk.
Yeah, they had this plan called what is it, defense in depth, right?
That's right.
Where it's basically a stall tactic where you just wear them out.
You wear them out, chew them up.
And if there was any people tougher in the world, I defy you to find them than those Soviets.
They had their babushka women out there digging tank ditches. And, as the Germans would advance, they'd fall down in these ditches and, tank couldn't get out, and then they'd kill the tank.
Yep.
And then they massed their artillery. And, the Germans had great tactical success at first, tank versus tank, but there was no way they were going to advance beyond this salient, this bulge. And they just got chewed up.
And you would think they learned their lesson because they tried the same thing.
At Leningrad,
right.
At Stalingrad. Yeah, Moscow.
Right.
Like, guys, this isn't going to work.
It's not going to work. And then they tried it again in Belgium, in the Battle of the Bulge against the West. It's the same thing.
Same thing.
It doesn't work, and you end up getting cut off and slaughtered.
They put all their chips, on one hand of poker, and they lost. And it's another indication that those early war successes of Hitler in France and Belgium and Norway, that this luster that he could do no wrong. Well, the Battle of Britain should have taught them a lesson, right? That he was not impervious. He wasn't a genius.
Well, they lost.
He was the Saddam Hussein of Germany.
Which is interesting because I'll find his name. I think it was Manstein. Erich von Manstein strongly requested. Oh, no, hold on. I'm wrong. Anyway, one of his generals basically said, look, we should not be doing this. Is dumb.
Yeah.
We don't have the things that we need to win a tank battle.
That's right.
The first is numbers. We don't have enough tanks.
Right.
The second is
supply
people.
lines.
Supply people.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have enough soldiers.
That's right.
And the third, or maybe the first, most important, was surprise.
Yeah.
And they didn't have it. So in the Blitzkrieg, they had surprise. Early in the war, they had surprise.
Yeah.
And they caught the West with their pants down because we didn't understand. The West did not understand at the time that that type of mobile warfare would be so effective.
Right.
They had air cover. They had surprise. They had troops.
Right.
They were well armed with plenty of tanks and armor to back up the job. And Kursk and Stalingrad and Moscow, they didn't have the surprise.
The Luftwaffe totally failed in Stalingrad.
Yep.
They weren't there in any kind of numbers at Kursk. And meanwhile, the Soviets had tank killer airplanes. They were popping tanks, man.
Yeah. So anyway, it failed miserably.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth at least mentioning a little bit more from a world history standpoint is that because Hitler made decisions like this, he was not able to defend in Normandy. He was not able to defend in Italy. He was not able to defend against the Allies because, look, resources are finite, folks. You can't, and maybe this is a good lesson in general.
It is. Like,
resources are finite. If you allocate all your money in a country and resources in a country to some cause that you have, it's not there for other things. You can't, this is called scarcity, and it's an economic lesson I think everybody should learn.
And we're approaching $1 trillion of aid to Ukraine. And it's not, I'm not trying to opinionate that we shouldn't help Ukraine, but you have to wonder because at some point there's going to have to be a negotiated settlement to that war. And you have to wonder, would the Ukrainians have been better off negotiating at the beginning of all this?
Yes, of course they would have been. And if we would have had somebody in the world, in the United States, in the White House, somebody who would say, you can't do this. Let's find a way to solve this problem now before a bunch of people die.
But just this week he's come out and strong.
Now he's come out strong.
He's coming out strong now.
After 1 million dead Ukrainians.
Now he is.
And $1 trillion in our, like we have money to burn.
It just is. It's so, it shows you what weakness and indecisiveness results in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like.
And they're running out of young men in Ukraine.
Well, it's inevitable.
They cannot restaff their army.
So now we're in a spot where are we going to just go in and take over the fighting? No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to put our boots on the ground. So you know what's going to happen. Putin's going to keep the territories already gained, and the war's going to end, and that'll be that without fanfare. And it wouldn't surprise me if they wait and let the Republicans do it, so they can blame the Republicans for letting Putin have the land. It's like there's going to be something like that going on.
Right.
But that's the inevitable outcome at this point. It has to be.
Right. And Putin would like to do that too, because
Putin would love to have a face to get out.
Well, and what that does is then that seals this trope that somehow Trump is Putin's boy.
Right.
So if Putin waits until Trump gets elected and then says, okay, we're done fighting, it'll look like that.
It'll look like that. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So now it's about playing it for optics as opposed to an actual objective, objective goal that makes sense for the world.
Right.
But it shows you at the beginning, if somebody would have said that, if there was a strong leader on anywhere in the world to say, nah.
Yeah. Right.
Nah.
Well, and I think, don't I remember correctly at the beginning of this, they were projecting all will be done. This will be done in a year.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we're rolling on to 3 years in this war.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Now
It'll
you're
be
talking.
quick.
And
Now
the
you're
latest-
now you're talking a generation that's affected by that. I mean, a short war probably doesn't really affect a generation so much.
Yeah, sort of
yes,
like
there's
the,
damage.
like the Civil War. It'll be just take a quick battle here and it'll
right.
be over, and
but
then
3
700,000 or
years,
600,000
you've messed with a
people.
generation of people.
And now they're getting down to like they're just wholesale killing civilians. So I think last week didn't one of Putin's, rockets destroy a children's hospital or
I
something?
missed that.
And
Oh my
something
gosh.
like 60,
But but it's
60
interesting.
children.
See, this because you follow it. I don't. I mean, this stuff isn't even hitting the news anymore. I mean,
No,
Right.
it's not.
it's like
you
it's
have
been
to
completely
you
ignored.
have to dig it out
Yeah.
because
Right.
everything's about men want to be women or who uses the
Well,
bathroom,
I think
who's going to
it's
the
no
Olympics.
longer a useful story.
That's right.
It's no longer a useful story
Yeah,
because
that's right.
it's
all bad.
It's all bad, and it's all reflective of horrible United States or lack of United States intervention.
Yeah.
Just enough to keep it going.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just enough money to keep people dying.
He was actually bragging in his press conference yesterday at NATO that he had gathered, I think his claim
being
was
Biden.
50 allies to oppose Putin. And it's like, man, is that an accomplishment? I don't know. So like you say, Steve, it's just enough to keep dragging this out.
Right.
So the latest thing is the Dutch gave F-16s to Ukraine. 3 years after the start? Like, what's that going to do now?
You know what it's like? It's like when you start a business and you've got this great idea and you think, I'm going to make $1 million. And about 6 months in, you haven't made any money yet. And you've got to make a decision. Am I going to keep pumping my own capital? Am I going to keep bilking my investors? Am I going to keep going forward without an objective here that makes any sense? You at some point, you have to abandon and recognize failure. This isn't working. Keeping this going is just enough to keep it going, which is just enough to maintain the ongoing loss of life and money and whatever tragedy is bestowed upon any civilization that's engaged in this kind of war.
Yeah.
It's like the suffering, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we authorize the Ukrainians to use our weapons inside Russia. That is total madness. I mean,
I got to tell you,
that is total madness. They can go 200 miles in from the border and attack targets inside Russia with American munitions, and we approve that. So
that's a real dangerous.
So then the Russians sail to Cuba, and they're going to teach us that lesson.
Yeah.
Well, hey,
yeah, what are you going to do?
we're 90 miles from Florida. Guess what?
Yeah. Once I heard that decision, in my mind, going, we're at war with Russia.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We're a proxy war anyway.
Basically, we are. We were anyway, but now we're allowing them to go. Again, they have to defend themselves. I'm not saying not to, but it's that go for it. Put it in.
We're escalating.
We're
escalating it.
Well, and even back in the days of Afghanistan, we didn't do that. At least we were supplying the Afghan troops, but in Afghanistan, right? We were supplying them for their own defense, not to go actually.
And we denied that we were doing it, to at least put lipstick on the pig.
Right.
This is like, oh no, Tony Blinken says, oh no, we approve that.
Yeah.
They can use weapons.
Lunacy.
Dude, deny it.
Right.
Like you can't.
We've told them they can only use this for defensive purposes. What they're doing with it, we're going to look into, and we will.
There you go.
And we will address it. We do not intend to engage in an active war against Russia. Instead, that's what they're doing.
That's what we're doing.
It's just stupidity.
Amateur hour.
As I often say, I'm not the one who invented this quote, but it's like I don't attribute this to anything other than a complete incompetence. I mean, these people are just completely incompetent and not equipped to deal with this.
Steve and Brett, the longer we get from, we were talking about World War II with the Russians, Germans, but we dropped 2 atomic weapons on Japan, and the longer we get away from the only time that nuclear or atomic weapons were used against a population, I think people forget how terrible, like it doesn't dawn on them now that the Cold War is supposedly over, what World War III would be like. I mean, we're talking your skin falls off, you boil, and you're gone in 10 seconds.
Think about the state of the world right now.
Jesus, people need to think about
we have the Red Army gearing up.
Yeah.
Now, I think,
and the Chinese gearing up.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I meant the Chinese army. But we have the Chinese army gearing up.
Yes, sir.
You have the Soviets, or the Russians rather, already active. And I don't think the Russians are an enemy in and of themselves that we would have to be overly concerned about. But you start combining allies against us, or combining those powers against us, now we've got another world conflict brewing.
And we were the only nuclear power. Now I think the club is like 15 nations.
Who doesn't? Yeah, or have access to it very quickly.
And I think the best defense, our last line of defense with Biden's policies with China are simply China. It's against their financial interest,
right,
to poke us too hard. They got too much invested here in the United States.
Right.
But that's the only leverage we've got.
That's the only leverage we've got left, right?
It seems to be, at least.
It certainly isn't our muscle flexing because,
no, they have a bigger Navy now than us.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's scary stuff.
They're passing us.
Scary stuff, and we're worried about putting women and men together. And can trans people be in the Navy? It's like I don't give a crap.
If they're willing to say "I do" and go do it, go.
Creating a diverse armed forces makes zero difference to me. Take the people who build our military back, give us strength, and put us back in the world play.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
I
anyway.
know it's such a big topic that your head explodes, and after a while you run out of words.
It just is. It's hard to. You have to put your head in the sand because, I can't think about this.
Right.
Exactly.
It's too much.
Because you're thinking about total annihilation of the human species.
We're talking about another
cockroaches
worldwide
will
conflict.
be the only thing that survives.
Right. It's too much.
It's too much, man.
Yeah.
So, you want to talk about the state fish?
Yeah, let's talk about the state. What is the state fish?
Let's lighten it up a second.
Yeah,
here.
just for a little bit. So, so House Bill 590. Yeah. You talk about bipartisanship. They voted 93-4 in the House. Bill number 599. I'm sure DeWine will sign this one. They pull about 9 million walleye out of Lake Erie a year, and they want to name the walleye as the state fish.
What is the state fish right now, or is there one?
I don't think there is.
Apparently, there isn't one. Then I guess.
But there's a lot of carping going on down at this state.
Who's the four that voted against this?
Well, they're probably from Cincinnati, and they probably want to name
that's
the
just
channel cat or something.
Yeah, the channel.
That's just odd that it.
I mean, isn't that's that's the biggest fishing industry, maybe the perch, I guess you could say.
You could say,
maybe.
yeah. Right.
I mean, look,
I need to look into
by
this.
the way, Lake Erie
against
walleye is badass.
It's fun. They're fun to catch. They're great to eat. Perch are better, but they're not as fun to catch.
Yeah.
So I mean, look, you could say maybe the small pond largemouth bass. I mean, for all the kids who go sneak around farm ponds and grab largemouth.
Yeah.
The bluegill.
There's nothing like a largemouth bass hitting your worm harness, your Texas worm rig.
And it's and that's an edible fish also. So.
I never eat them, but
But
they're fun to catch. I mean, they're vicious fish. Anyway, so now we know the walleye, and it should be, I guess. I mean, if for financial, if economics are anything to do with it, that's a huge industry.
They say in Lake Erie there's a population right around 70 million, and they're catching about 1 out of every 7 every year.
Jeez.
It's so much fun to catch.
Yeah.
I mean, casting and drifting for walleye is a blast. Now people troll for them, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But when you learn the swing when you're casting and drifting, and it just comes over the bow, and you feel it start to hit, that's a great fishing experience.
The other fun story, and then we can get into sad stories. But the other fun story is, I don't know if you guys have ever been to Tom's Ice Cream Bowl in Zanesville.
I have not.
Dude, killer! I mean, they make their own ice cream.
So Tom can make a mean ice cream.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's an institution in Zanesville. It's been there for, I don't know, probably almost 100 years, and it looks like it when you're inside. It's that old timey kind of stuff. And anyway, they have created, they being the Ohio Tourism Board or Department, something I guess to compete with Tennessee and Kentucky. They've created the Ohio Ice Cream Trail.
Okay.
Right? Because we don't have bourbon really big in Ohio.
We just got a lot of fat people eating ice cream.
So they created the Ohio Ice Cream Trail, and
it's all on a bike route. So you have to,
right.
You
have to walk,
right?
Walk or ride. No electric bikes.
And I guess they're one of the first. So they're going to roll them all out.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I mean that's fun.
But there's a lot of ice cream in Ohio. I don't know about other places, but what was the ice cream store that burned a while back? Was it Velvet?
Velvet.
It was Velvet.
Velvet. And
that
then
was
there's
up in Utica, right?
And then then there's that killer place over.
Oh, you got Jenny's right here in Columbus.
Jenny's.
And then you get Graders that
Graders
started in Cincy.
What's the one over there by?
There was Knight's Ice Cream,
like
right
where
there.
Chappelle lives.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking.
Yeah,
Is
so
it
Magnetic Springs.
Young's
Dairy.
Young's Dairy.
That
Right.
rocks.
Oh,
too.
that's like you go by that on the highway. I mean, there's
Oh, well, it's not even just the ice cream; it's the food, and now they've got a mini golf course.
Yeah.
They've got pettings. I mean, it's blowing up.
So I'm sure
yeah.
that's on the trail.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
yeah, we're going to be competing with the Corn Palace before you know it.
I thought we'd talk a little bit maybe about, speaking of things people like to do recreationally, is the Cannabis Control Division of the Ohio Department of Commerce. So they're getting ready. They say around November they'll have all these regs and everybody signed up and all the dispensaries for cannabis and the labs and the growers and the processors. They'll have all that all figured out, all licensed. And I guess they're forecasting it. So we voted on yes or no on that last November, and I guess it's taking a whole year. And the industry seems to be okay with it. I've read quotes where some of the growers and the labs that have done this in other states said that Ohio has moved at lightning speed.
Yeah, we really have.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we really have.
Okay.
I mean, think it was less than a year ago, right?
Yeah.
That this was going. So now we've got.
And I don't know anything to compare it to other states. I didn't know it was.
I don't either,
supposed to be
but
a
I just
slower,
know
fast process.
I expected it to take a lot longer.
Wow.
So I know that they were the current medical marijuana license holders were given a preference, and I think they all had options to go recreational with their current locations, and then they opened it up to applicants. I always wonder how people obtain such a valuable permit. It's always
right.
you always wonder what it takes, and it's probably money in the backdrop somewhere. But
Yeah, I think Steve, just to give you a number, I think they said 200 applied to be, because you had to have several things to even apply.
Yeah.
200 applied to be dispensaries, and they are in the process of licensing out of that 112.
Yeah, and those people then, I think this week, had to put in locations for where they want their dispensaries. And there's some rules on that. It can't be so close to a school, and it can't be within another mile radius it can't be within a mile radius of another location that's already established.
Okay.
So it's like it's like the Wild West land grab. People are running out and literally planting their flags in the ground of various locations. And if their locations gets drawn, all of a sudden that location happens to be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, so they're getting their franchise.
Yeah.
Right.
Their territory.
They're getting their territory. So the address becomes valuable.
Yeah. Okay.
So you've got land developers involved, you've got dispensaries involved, you've got landowners involved. It's everybody stands. If you happen to be in the right little slice, you stand to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
I don't remember what the projected income for the state is supposed to be. I know it's supposed, and that might be why the fast track's happening too.
No, that's right. There's a lot of money to be made. And I will say this is that unless the state regulates it, there's not a lot of money to be made. I mean, or at least the market will tamp itself out. This happened in Oklahoma. We went out and explored that market for whatever reason. One time I was talking to some lawyers out there, and there were just too many. Oklahoma was wide open. If you were a resident of Oklahoma, you could grow and or open up a medical dispensary. There was no other regulation.
Okay.
And you had them right next door to each other. And eventually, the market was saturated. And it was. I concluded leaving those meetings, talking to the lawyers and talking to the regulators.
Nobody's making
There's
money.
just not enough marijuana smokers. And I sort of sarcastically said, marijuana is not addicting enough.
Yeah.
Because not enough people are using it to warrant this. And then what also happened is out there, and this is relevant for what we're talking about a minute ago, is that China went out and they're buying up farmland, thousands of acres at a time, because they are growing marijuana. They're taking over the marijuana grows. And the growers can't compete. There was a bunch of Californiites, the professional growers from California were producing their best product. Chinese are figuring out how to do it, and they can do it cheaper. The labor to come in and clip and do whatever you need to do to get the plants to bud, or to get the plants to bud and get the bud to pot.
Gotcha. They're undercutting.
They're undercutting the market and taking over. So it just we ran into a guy who had a trunk load. He was from California, professional grower out there from Humboldt County or whatever.
Okay.
And he had come to Oklahoma when it first opened up, but he had his best marijuana, his best weed. I don't smoke weed, so I don't know much about it, but apparently this was his best he could do, is like fifth generation of iterations that incorporated the land, the water, everything else. And it was a trunk full of it. He couldn't sell it. He was driving around all day, spent a tank of gas trying to look for some dispensary to buy it. Couldn't sell it. So the point of all this is to say that unless Ohio regulates the market and artificially regulates the market, there's not going to be enough demand for the supply.
That's mind-blowing, actually, because I'm thinking of the Grapes of Wrath, where the Okies went to Humboldt County, California, right?
That is sort
And
of
you got a
interesting.
guy,
Now it's opposite.
growing in Humboldt, going to Oklahoma to sell.
And the same problem in reverse. Too many labors. Right?
Man, Steinbeck would be blown away. He'd be like, "What?"
There we go. The land of milk and honey.
So I don't know what, like in Michigan, I know a lot of Ohio users will go to Michigan because I guess there you can get the marijuana at a fairly reasonable price, I guess.
Well, you can get it legally at a store.
At a store.
Right.
Yeah. So I just I'm wondering the same thing Brett is, like how big this industry will really be, because people privately, I think, under some of these rules will be able to grow six
plants.
Yeah.
And I heard, I was talking to somebody that grows, and he or she said that
there's no difference anymore.
That a plant can produce roughly like 1 pound of very potent.
If you're good at it.
And I'm like, how long will that last? And they're like, a pretty long time, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing to recognize. And the weed or the marijuana being produced today is not the marijuana of our college days.
No, I guess not.
You know, this stuff is far more potent and far more.
That's what I hear. Yeah.
Efficiently grown than it ever has been, you know, and just think where that's going. I mean, it can only get better.
Yeah. Or worse.
Or it depends on what you want.
However you look at it, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
You know, I mean, if a little is good, a lot is better. That's the way.
So this is kind of a fun story, even though it's, you know, I guess enough time has passed. But up in Cleveland, back in the 30s, there was an unsolved serial killer on the loose, and they called him, I assume it's him, the torso killer or the mad butcher. And he killed and dismembered more than a dozen people, and they would find bits and parts all over, you know, this particular area of Cleveland. And it's gone unsolved for 90 years. Nobody ever arrested or prosecuted. And there's something called the DNA Doe, like Jane Doe, DNA Doe Project, which will lend assistance on DNA matters to medical examiners around the country. But they need private funding, and apparently a private anonymous donor came forward and is paying to have this case possibly solved. And they're going to start exhuming these torsos, these parts of people, and the Cleveland Police Department kept their death masks. So where the heads were still there, they took death masks, you know, molds of their faces, but, you know, they had no DNA testing back then. And they're hoping when they exhume these people, they can get DNA samples and then match them up to, you know.
So they think they can get DNA samples of the killer?
Of the dead people, because they were unidentified.
Oh, I see what's going on.
Only one or two. So then they couldn't tie it together. Like, were they all working at the same factory or, you know, how, you know, were they mob hits?
Figuring out the identity of the victims will assist in identifying potential. Yeah, I got you. It's sort of like the, who's the guy who jumped out of the plane?
Oh, yeah, D.B. Cooper.
Sort of like D.B. Cooper.
Yeah,
people trying to solve that years later.
Yeah. So they're you know, people in Cleveland are kind of excited to see what happens. So we'll see. Speaking of death, I'm sure you guys were as torn up as me about this mother who was a speech teacher at Canal Winchester. And late at night after she finished, so she was working 2 jobs, speech therapist or whatever you call it. She had her master's from Ohio State, and she was doing that days. And then in the evening, she was working as a waitress. And she gets off work. This happened yesterday. She gets off work yesterday morning, gets to the babysitter at 1 a.m. To get her 6-year-old son, puts the 6-year-old son in the Honda CRV, goes back to the front door to get his stuff from the babysitter to walk it back to the car. And by the time she went back to the babysitter to get her stuff, somebody jumped, 2 young men, they say, unidentified, no video so far. They don't know exactly who they are, but they think they may have some leads. But 2 young men got in the car, whether they knew a baby was in there or not. They took off with her car, and she jumped on the car. She jumped on the car. They took her on a little bit of a wild ride. She got ejected off the top of the car after, stop, that's my baby, that kind of thing. And she got a fatal head wound from falling off the vehicle. Died at Mount Carmel East. And so she was 29, a member of the faculty at Canal Winchester. Apparently everybody loved her. Name Alexa Stakely, 29, dead. Her son was okay. The men that took the car abandoned the car, and the kid was okay.
Okay.
But I mean, what an awful.
Did they catch the people?
They don't know. They're not sure who they are. They have video of a gang of boys doing something bad about a block over, like looking to break into some apartments, and they think maybe
they're just trying to steal a car and there's a kid in it.
Yeah. Wow.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I mean, just makes you sick. And she should be Mother of the Year, working 2 jobs, and then literally gave her life to try to save her son.
Yeah.
Well, look, guys, we shifting the topic again. We try to do legal breakdowns, or I try to do legal breakdowns of big cases or court cases that come out. I've been gone the last couple of weeks, and in my absence, the U.S. Supreme Court has decided a number of cases. But I think the one I'll try to do a quick breakdown on, or at least I think it's worth kicking around, is the Trump versus United States, where the United States Supreme Court sort of outlined the rules of immunity for a president, what they are, what they aren't, where even members of the court have, I think, grossly exaggerated what they believe they are. And that, of course, has been the trope the media has picked up on. And I think, it's an interesting... We should go back and listen to our discussion on it, because I know we spent a good deal of time talking about what we thought how this would shake out.
Yeah.
And I think we all sort of agreed that it would have to shake out in some way like this, that if the president is doing something the president is supposed to do, he should be immune for that. But if he's committing crimes, he should not be immune for that.
Yeah.
And we sort of said if he's doing something official.
Committing unofficial crimes.
Yeah, unofficial crimes.
I mean, official crimes, you could say, Biden or Obama or Trump, a drone mission that without any trial kills an American citizen in another country. You could say, well, he murdered them.
I would venture to guess. Well, so let's talk about what this case says.
Yeah.
It basically outlines 3 levels of immunity. The first level is if the president, whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, whether it's Obama, or whether it was George Washington, if the president is acting directly within the scope of their constitutionally or duties granted by Congress through statute, if he's acting under that hat directly, he has absolute immunity. So what are those things? And, that would be like securing the borders.
Right.
If he's engaged in war, defending the country.
Right.
Could you prosecute Truman for dropping the bomb? It's like those are those things. The answer is no. Or Obama for droning his enemies or the terrorists. Right. The president has immunity for those things, and it's absolute immunity.
Lincoln appropriating private land to build the railroads, for example.
Yeah.
You can't call that theft.
You can't call it theft.
Because it's in the Constitution that the federal government has a right.
It's called the taking clause. Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
So those kinds of things.
Those kinds of things. And I don't think anybody should quibble with that. I can't imagine anybody would quibble with that. Yeah. And this is the point I was trying to make, or you were trying to make when we were talking at the roundtable. The point I was trying to make is, but on the other end of the spectrum, you can't give a president immunity if he commits crimes.
No.
So what we're talking about is you could have the same act, theoretically homicide, killing somebody.
Yeah.
And in one context, that's murder.
Yeah, FDR cannot kill Eleanor because he's pissed at her.
But he could kill Japanese civilians by dropping the bomb.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not that FDR did that, but the Truman did that. But it's like, it's still homicide, taking one human life by another. So anybody who went to law school knows this. You have homicide, which is taking one human life by another. And then you have murder, which is taking one human life by another with malice aforethought, right? So it's like you have, is it murder? In other words, is it a crime? Or is it something that is protected under the presidential, immunity? So the same act, 2 different contexts. One's can be prosecuted without immunity. The other cannot.
Yeah.
And then in the middle, you had sort of these official acts, things that you're doing as president. The court sort of outlined 3 levels. The first being absolute immunity. The third being no immunity whatsoever for crimes.
Yeah.
And in the middle are things like that are sort of in the middle, like these official acts.
Yeah.
Maybe not so clear.
Because the president, in his oath to,
Uphold the law.
To uphold the Constitution, uphold the laws of the United States, et cetera, right? And that's gray. I mean, there's some gray area there, right? In Trump's particular case, right, the question is, was he contacting Georgia and these other venues as president to make sure we have a clean election system?
Mm-hmm.
And that was why he's contacting them.
Right.
Or was it because candidate Trump, to benefit himself purely, is after that $400,000 a year job and the power that it has to continue?
And the Supreme Court did not decide that issue.
They sent it back.
They sent it back because what they did in the middle is they created something called a presumption of immunity, where, all right, this could be an official act defined the way you just said. Yeah. So we're going to presume, at least for now, that that's an immunity, or there's immunity for that, but it can be overcome. That's what the courts have to figure out on a case-by-case basis. What is the purpose of it, and is there immunity? So the law creates presumptions, and presumptions are these, anybody who's studied evidence knows that this is murky water.
Yeah,
So you're presumed to start innocent. But what does that really mean? I mean, if you've ever sat at a counsel table accused of a crime, you don't feel presumed innocent at all.
Right.
Right. But in theory, the jury is instructed, you must presume that this gentleman is innocent or this lady is innocent until the prosecutor proves otherwise beyond a reasonable doubt, or with proof and evidence that amounts to beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
So it's a presumption. It can be overcome.
It can be overcome.
It can be overcome. And, there's two different theories on presumptions, whether you nibble away at it or something else called the bursting bubble theory of presumptions, where as soon as you present enough evidence, it's gone, and there's no more presumption, immunity's gone. And I think that's what this is. So the immunity's going to be gone as soon as this government, or whoever's prosecuting, the president, in this case Trump, establishes that this was not an official act with some evidence, some credible evidence.
Yeah.
And that is going to have to be something that the court itself, the trial court level, has to decide. And each one of those now will matriculate up and sort of be evaluated.
Yeah.
And that's the only way it can happen, because here's what the Supreme Court is supposed to do, and here's what it's not supposed to do. And every time it does what it's not supposed to do, we end up in trouble. The Supreme Court is not supposed to be a fact-finding mission. It's not supposed to be a court of fact where people present testimony, evidence, new information.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court is an appellate court of record. It looks at the record on appeal and decides what it can based on the facts that are there.
Yeah. There
are times in the court's history where it has not done that. Roe v. Wade was one of them. Brown versus Board of Education was another.
Yeah.
I think it was Brown. They've done this at times, and they get way out over their skis because it creates precedent that can't be undone based on facts that have changed later.
Yes.
So the idea is to pronounce the law and the rule, not decide facts.
Even if it's a hard thing, even if it's almost incomprehensible to people. So, like, for example, in the Dobbs decision, I heard Biden last night at his press conference refer to the current Supreme Court as the most conservative court in American history, and how they're out of control. And of course, and then I hear people like Glenn Beck and some of the commentators talk about how that was a pro-life decision. And it was nothing of the kind in either case.
It was nothing, right?
It was nothing of kind. It was a subject matter that belongs to the states.
Sure.
And that's what it was. That's a decision.
Even if it's not subject matter that belongs to the states, it was decided on facts that weren't in the record. Yeah. All right. So when Roe v. not Dobbs, but when Roe v. Wade was decided, it was decided they created this trimester scheme. Yeah. That was not presented at a trial.
No.
That was that was taken from other places. Right. So once the U.S. Supreme Court does that, there's no way to go backwards, or it gets very difficult to go backwards if those facts change. Yeah. This is why this is a legislative question, because on the legislative floor, you can debate these things. Right. We can present evidence. We saw hearings the other day on free speech where they're taking testimony and evidence.
Yeah.
That becomes a record. That becomes the congressional record, and you can act on that. But you know what else you can do is you can add to it, or you can change it, or you can add contrary facts when they change. So it may be that certain medical things were true at the time Roe v. Wade was decided, but now, however many years later, 50 years later.
Like viability.
Like viability, right.
It's a great example.
Now that's changed.
Yeah, babies can survive at a much younger age of gestation now
but as soon as
than
that
they used
becomes
to be.
constitutional law, it's chiseled in granite. It becomes very difficult to change.
And that was 50 years,
right.
Ro.
So
50
this is
years.
why the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't decide these things. So here in Trump's case, in Trump versus the United States, the court remands it back. And that's fancy lawyer talk way of saying they sent it back to the trial court and say, you figure this crap out.
Figure the facts out.
You figure out the facts. You know why? Because you're the person that can take testimony.
Right.
You, judge, are the person that gets to hear witnesses.
Right.
You get to look at exhibits.
Exactly.
You get to consider this. And you know what? You've been doing this a long time. It's a life appointment, or in theory, your court system has been engaged in fact-finding missions forever. We don't decide facts. You decide the facts.
So, Steve, the only nibble I have to pick on that decision is I'm with Coney Barrett, and I don't know if she put this in her in her I don't know in the decision if she expressed this, but during the hearing of the case, she expressed her belief, or her impulse was that for any kind of case, criminal case brought against a president, former president, she was of the opinion, at least during the discussion with the attorneys back and forth, that it needed to be in federal court, because we're talking about a federal officer and what he or she may have done, right, while in office, but had done privately, and let the federal judges sort that out. And I think that would be an improvement on this decision had they said, listen, the state courts can't manage this. There's going to be too much partisanship, too much like when a Democrat's in office and gets out of office, then a Republican prosecutor can go rogue, and vice versa. And so it needs to be in federal court, where at least the federal judges go through some kind of vetting process. They're not just elected.
Well, this happens to be coming up on a federal case, so it is a federal district court that's deciding this. But I think what you're saying
I'm
is
talking about the New York case.
The New York case, right? So is
on January 6th.
But you could choose the federal area of the country to take it to,
and that's
a little bit more open to what you want to.
You see the difference between a quality of judge like Mershon and Eileen Cannon down in Florida.
Yeah, but you know what though?
There's a qualitative judge.
Let me push back.
Go ahead.
The idea here is it's a state court. Say it's a state court judge.
Yeah.
There is a hierarchy of review that can happen after that. So
That's
if
true.
State court judges all the time decide federal issues.
Right.
All the time.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they have the last say, though.
That's right.
So, for instance, here in Ohio, I'm defending a criminal case, and I have a trial, and the judge says, no, you're not allowed to cross-examine this witness on this topic. So I say, objection, judge.
Right.
It's a violation of my right of confrontation, my right to cross-examine, my right to be Matlock or Perry Mason or whatever it would be in the courtroom. And that, for those government scholars, is the Sixth Amendment, among other things in the Sixth Amendment. So the judge says, nope, overruled. Well, the judge has just made a decision on a federal Sixth Amendment right. The judge also has made a decision because Ohio has something similar in its constitution. But now I appeal, and I go up to the Ohio Court of Appeals directly, and I say, Ohio Court of Appeals, this judge effed this up and violated my client's right to the Sixth Amendment or right of confrontation under the Sixth Amendment. Court says, yeah, we hear you. You sounded good, made a good argument in writing, and you're pretty eloquent here in the courtroom, but nope. Denied. Yeah. I go to the Ohio Supreme Court and I say the same thing, and they say, nope, we're either not going to look at it or we'll look at it, and denied. Now I get to go to federal court.
I got you.
And a federal district judge, either in habeas corpus review, or I can go directly to the United States Supreme Court and petition for cert.
I get you.
And there's review. So
let me push back on you.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't disagree with you about that is still offering fairness. I agree with you. And there's lots of due process. I agree with you. What I am troubled by, I think Coney Barrett was troubled by, was the idea that we're dragging former POTUSes, through a very drawn-out, long process that would be more cleanly and just as much due process if it started in the federal system. Okay. That's all I'm saying.
So what needs to happen?
So instead of a 5-year thing,
Congress needs to pass a law that says any former president must be prosecuted in federal court.
They do.
All right. That can happen.
Actions need to be brought at the federal
there's
level.
No reason that the Congress can't. I can't think of any reason. There might be one, but I can't think of any solid reason why that couldn't be a congressional act.
Yeah.
But it doesn't exist now. So the states can prosecute the guy.
That's right.
And that's that. And the U.S. Supreme Court is not entitled, in my opinion, to pronounce that as a rule of law.
So like when Fani Willis, right, campaigns on the idea that she's going to go get that guy, right?
Yep.
And she campaigned locally.
And so did the weasel in New York.
Yes, right. Bragg.
Bragg, yeah.
They campaign that they're going to go after a free citizen, whether they like popular.
They targeted a guy. Who happened to be their political enemy.
Exactly. And the feds would not openly do that because they're not running for office. Now they may like.
They absolutely would, and they absolutely can. And,
like Comey,
and it's not that they're running for office, but they're appointed by the guy in charge.
That's right. So, nobody. I would say Garland has been nakedly partisan in what he has done at the Department of Justice, for example. But he didn't run for office on a platform to destroy another person, which is what they're doing at the state level.
So, but there's redress for that. And look, our system is not perfect, but you can't make it perfect with pronouncements out of turn by the United States Supreme Court. The reason our system is as perfect as it gets is because we don't do those things. And the Supreme Court does not have the authority, nor should it, to pronounce that as a law. I would be all in favor of that if it came from Congress.
But there are a lot of subject matters that you have to file in federal court.
Because of the United States Code says so.
Yes, exactly.
Right, not because of a pronouncement by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Like admiralty cases.
Sure.
Either
the Constitution says it or the U.S. Code says it through an act of Congress.
Yeah.
So
when a barge hits another barge on the Ohio River, they don't file in an Ohio court.
You can.
I think if it's under the admiralty statutes that
but so this isn't you have most of these things have concurrent jurisdiction. So for instance, I had a case on the Ohio River where my client was accused of being under the influence of alcohol and ran into another boat. Somebody died. It was prosecuted in state court.
Yeah.
And the issue was not only could it be prosecuted in state court, which state, because is it Kentucky or Ohio?
Yeah.
Or could it be both? And could it be prosecuted in federal court under some admiralty law?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably yes.
Yeah.
But this happens all the time. Say a bank robbery. The federal courts have jurisdiction over bank robberies, but they're often prosecuted in state court too.
Yeah.
Kidnapping is another one.
Yeah, sure.
Drug trafficking is another big example.
But
child pornography.
some matters you have to start in federal court, and this is where I think a president of the United States I think is one.
Maybe. But I would define it by the act. We would probably agree more than we would disagree, but I would define it by the act, not the person.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
I think if there's a hint that he's operating within the duty. Now look, there's another thing in civil courts. Very interesting. So if I'm suing one person, or if I'm suing somebody or a corporation or somebody for civil damages, and I file a lawsuit against you, and the question is, where can that be filed?
That's right.
And sometimes that can be filed in federal court. Sometimes it can be filed in state court. Sometimes both. Sometimes I file it in state court, and you get to remove it to federal court.
All bankruptcies, federal.
Those are federal. But sometimes I can file a suit against you, and you remove it to federal court because it raises a federal question, or under diversity of citizenship because you live in a different state.
Right.
Sometimes, so it gets jurisdiction between federal and state gets blurry.
Yeah.
And the only point I'm making here is not to disagree with you, but to say it takes an act of Congress to establish it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess the U.S. Supreme Court.
And I guess that's why they didn't legislate in this case. I wish they could have said, they could have directed or said something about this as a matter for Congress.
If they could have. Yeah. If they were being partisan as accused by the dissent.
Yeah.
To create what she is, Ketanji Brown Jackson, I think, wrote the dissent. Or it was Ketanji. It wasn't Sotomayor. But she's making these absurd claims that this means the president can hire SEAL Team 6 to kill its
that
political
was Sotomayor.
Or was it Sotomayor?
That was Sotomayor.
Okay, so either way, it's an absurd.
It's absurd.
It's absurd.
Right.
It is hyperbolic and absurd, and that was a political dissent.
No question.
And I think if the majority, and of course this strikes along the party lines, but if the majority wanted to be partisan it would have agreed with Trump and said you're immune. It did nothing of the sort. In fact,
right.
it explicitly said nothing of the
That's
sort.
right.
We do not agree with Trump that he's entitled to immunity for all these things, just as an absolute right.
Right.
And they sent it down and said, look, something. But the court took on maybe more than it needed to, and to that extent, I'd have to give it some more thought. They didn't necessarily have to create this whole hierarchy of immunity or whatever. They could have just said, look, he's not immune here, go back.
Well, I'm glad they did what they did.
It sort of needed to happen, and this is likely to repeat.
They gave us a framework.
Well, and they're reading the tea leaves.
Yeah.
That, okay, this junk is not going away. You know, for all the...
Look, if it's not Trump, it's going to be the next guy.
Exactly.
Now that
brewing. Yeah.
Now
They opened Pandora's box.
It's-
Once they got political, first time they've ever done this to a former president. It's ridiculous.
It's gone. They know the backlash is going to be back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I might, so we talked about this before too, and I thought these two stories that I recently read kind of come in line. But we know states are traditionally relied on gas taxes for road maintenance.
Yep.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Wow.
But fuel efficient cars and EV are reducing the revenues across states. So there are a few states now that have introduced a delivery fee. Colorado introduced it, 29 cents per delivery in 2022. It's generated over $160 million.
Meaning like Amazon coming to you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Minnesota has it, 50-cent fee
Wow.
on purchases over $100.
So Uber Eats, it's over $100 for your...
Typically, from what I'm reading, Amazon, the road heavy, road warrior, this kind of stuff. Washington has it. Illinois has it.
So the consumer will pay a road tax
basically for the delivery.
for not using the road.
Exactly.
And hiring somebody else to use.
Because of like EV. So let's turn it to Ohio. And from what I'm seeing, you mentioned this before we went on to record, that Governor Mike DeWine raised the gas tax in 19.
Yeah, first thing he did in office.
He's considering another one.
Oh, God.
So I'm thinking this out, that he's kind of between a rock and a hard place. Number one, if he does suggest, and he's already done, and this, when it floated in 19, no one was really happy about it, an increase on tax on gas, the party's not going to go for this. He's going to get blowback. Big time blowback. Okay.
Well, it depends on what faction of the party, but yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And DeWine can't increase EV registrations. He can't do that.
Not by himself.
But what I'm saying is the look of it. He just brought in this big battery factory down in Jeffersonville.
Right.
So that's going to smack that in the face.
Yeah.
You're
right. They're losing revenue.
Honda.
Yeah, it's
right,
incongruent with his other actions.
So my guess is he's going to go with delivery fee.
Wow.
Probably.
And so let's go further with this delivery fee.
As if, just let me say that.
Go ahead.
As if UPS and Amazon and all the other FedEx don't build into what they charge you their gas tax.
Yeah.
Of course, you're paying it already.
You're paying it already.
Yeah.
Right. You're paying it already.
So let's go further.
Wow.
So let's not just say it's Amazon and FedEx. Let's go anything that delivers anything.
A spoiled rose by any other name is still a spoiled rose.
Yeah.
Right.
How about we start taxing food trucks?
Well, I'm sure.
Because they're delivering food to a side street or wherever it might be.
And the little Domino delivery kid.
The Napa delivery trucks.
Yeah, sure.
That bring to us guys working on our cars.
It's absurd.
All of this is to say that the government in general, state, local, federal, can't live within their own budget.
That's right.
Right.
Like, there's plenty of money.
There's plenty of money.
Just start allocating.
Yeah, and we should be taxing CODA as well too. And any heavy object, anything really.
Instead of giving them money.
Exactly. Yeah. But again, it comes down to, we've talked about this before.
Why
are we eating this because of EV batteries?
Right.
I have no problem if you want to raise it, because the registration fee for
it's very low.
It's $100 for hybrids, $200 for plug-in EVs,
which does not in no way represents what they would have spent on gas tax.
Up.
Yeah,
crank that up.
Yes. When you want an EV, then go pay for it.
Exactly.
Because actually EVs per car weigh way more.
Yes, they
do.
That's
a huge problem, right?
That
nobody's talking about. But
right, exactly.
It just is a classic just ripple effect of stupid government mandates in economics.
That's
right. You start, when the government starts cramming down economic incentives, and I'll put incentives in quotes for the reason they should be, which is because it's stupid.
To steer behavior.
It creates a ripple effect because human nature is not going to do it. You know, they're not going to like it. And you're going to have a leak somewhere in the dike. You know, this is my analogy on this. I'm a woodworker. Anybody who's ever tried to build a perfect picture frame with 45 degrees, when one of them is off and you try to tweak it, you start, all of them get monkeyed. So you're like, all right, I'll just fix this one. Then you got to fix the next one, then the next one. And then you're back to square one, except now the whole frame is smaller and it doesn't fit. And you got to, it's like, it is a disaster.
Yeah.
You can't do it. Once you start tinkering with it, it doesn't work. And this is what this is. Mm-hmm. They've crammed down EVs on people and now it's killing the roads and they got to pay for the roads. But because they got to pay for the roads, they don't want to act like it's the EVs that are causing the problems. They're going to start causing, or whatever. I'm making this up, but
no.
The point is, I think that's what this is.
Here's another one. I'll pile on. So this is another example of, if you will, a hidden tax. So Senate Bill 79, which was bipartisan, one of the most conservative House members, Bill Seitz from Cincinnati, as a co-sponsor, for example, and then some liberal Democrat up on Lake Erie in Westlake, Ohio, is a co-sponsor. And what this bill does, it allows Ohio utilities. Now, this all sounds real happy. Ohio utilities can offer rebates for energy efficient appliances and thermostats, right? Okay. So that all sounds real happy. But of course, the PUCO controls the rates that Ohio utilities can charge you. So that means the rest of us ratepayers, right, are underwriting somebody else's purchase of energy efficient appliances.
No, let's change the words. New appliances.
New appliances.
Right.
Well,
and who's buying those? And generally well-heeled people. It won't be somebody poor.
So I don't know. I have not done a deep dive into this, but I do know this. I knew somebody who had a refrigerator in their garage. Right, had a refrigerator in the garage.
Sure.
And this is always the one that used to be in like the old house.
Right.
You know,
he's got his Coors Light or whatever in there.
Yeah. Somehow or another, somebody did an energy audit on it. Maybe the power company came out and said, "Look, we're going to test this and we're going to do it." And then they did an energy audit on, and this was not the state of the art energy efficient.
A 1950s Norge
in a garage that is heated. Right.
Sure.
So it's like the difference was like almost insignificant on what the fridge in the garage was using that was 50 years old versus the new one they bought. It's like, it's all BS.
Yeah, it's like $12 a year.
And again, that refrigerator, to your point, that refrigerator or freezer that was built in the 50s or 60s was built to last, number one, built to hold the coldness in.
It still works.
They're better manufactured.
It still works.
So it's going to be more efficient
because
they're better
built. And what are you going to do with the old one? You're going to dump it in the ground?
That's what'll happen.
With Freon or whatever the poison is that they're going to talk about?
And get a check from AEP for $200 because you went down to Home Depot and bought a new one.
Right, because you padded the pockets of HH or what's the Big Sandy.
But then the rest of us Ohioans, we're the ones that are giving you that rebate.
I'm going to save my money because I don't want to buy a new refrigerator, or I can't.
Yeah.
Or I bought one last year.
Right.
So I don't get the benefit.
Well, remember the Obama appliance program?
Yeah.
I mean, remember that deal?
Yeah.
And it was all fairly wealthy people that went out and bought all new fridges and everything.
Right.
And you're like, well, wait a minute. Our household income's maybe $50,000. We can't afford to do this.
Same thing when they gave a break on the big SUVs. If you used them, you could say they were for work. Remember all that crap? So people are buying the big SUVs. I mean, it's like it benefits the wealthy.
Exactly right.
Like all these things.
And it steers. The whole idea is under a good, a happy thing. Oh, we're going to save the environment and energy efficiency. You're steering people's behavior with taxpayer, or in this case, ratepayer money.
And
it's not fair to the rest of them.
You're incentivizing people with your money, with other people's money.
With other people's money.
Right. So that's what and think about it, that's what the government always does. The government doesn't have any money. They have other people's money.
Instead of just letting it be a market.
Right. This is not the government's money
decision.
It's your money.
Right.
So,
going back
we need Thomas Sowell at the table.
Yeah. And we can end on this. And speaking of the market, not dictating, but equalizing everything out. So for a while we were talking about how fast food prices going up. Now all of a sudden there's a little bit of fast food war going on.
Oh, have you
between
noticed?
Wendy's and McDonald's are starting to lower prices
they have to,
now
because people aren't buying it.
Exactly.
That $5 thing.
And guess what? It works, doesn't it?
It does.
It works.
It turns out people know what they want to spend their money on.
Uh-huh.
And McDonald's and Wendy's know if I come in for the $5, killer deal, and they say, "Do you want to upsize that?" right, and turn it into a $7 or $8 deal.
Once you're there, you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
You might do it, and it's your choice at that
and that's
point in
the
time.
marketplace.
Exactly.
That's the
So I think that's
marketplace.
kind of funny. You see, all of a sudden now the price wars are going on out there.
Let it
I
happen,
love it.
but-
I love it.
All right, well, with that, we got to wrap it up. We've been at it, Common Sense Ohio, on this July 12, 2024, with the summer. Once you cross that threshold or the precipice of 4th of July, it's all downhill from there.
Oh, come on.
Next thing you know, your kids are
Oh,
showing
God.
your kids are showing up at football camp on August 1. That's like 3.5 weeks away. The cheerleading practice starts. School is coming like a freight train right around the corner. The chance to earn that last couple bucks at the summer job is almost done. Hopefully you saved enough kids for your social activities and your boyfriends and girlfriends going forward. But here at Common Sense Ohio, we don't care. We're coming back next week and the week after.
Right.
And the week after that, and so on and so on. You can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com. I won't go into all that nonsense again, but that's where you go. Brought to you by Harper Plus, where we are coming at you right from the middle each and every week, at least until now.